Good evening and welcome back to Chill and Feel Chronicles, where the forgotten worlds of history come alive, one peaceful story at a time. Before we begin tonight's journey, if you enjoy slow, immersive history documentaries that help you relax, unwind, or gently fall asleep, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. And wherever you're watching from tonight, tell us in the comments what country are you in, and what time is it there right now. It's always wonderful to see this community of history lovers gathering from all around the world. Now, close your eyes for just a moment. Imagine the first rays of morning sunlight touching a quiet Japanese valley more than 400 years ago. A thin veil of mist drifts between rows of weathered wooden houses. The stone road is still empty, untouched except for the gentle footprints left by yesterday's rain. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell slowly rings across the mountains, its deep echo rolling through forests of cedar and bamboo. The cool air carries the scent of damp earth, fresh pine, and smoke rising from the first household fires of the day. Nothing rushes. Nothing disturbs the silence. It is a world that seems almost untouched by time. Yet behind these simple wooden doors lived some of the most disciplined, respected, and mysterious people in Japanese history, the samurai. But what was life really like inside a samurai village? Were samurai truly fearless warriors, whose lives revolved only around swords, battles, and honor? Or were they also fathers who laughed with their children, mothers who managed busy households, teachers who passed on ancient wisdom, farmers who cared for the land, and quiet guardians who protected their neighbors long after the wars had faded into memory? History often remembers the clash of steel, the legendary duels, the powerful warlords, the rise and fall of great castles. But the greatest part of a samurai's life was not spent on the battlefield. It was lived here, along peaceful village roads, inside humble wooden homes, beside temple gardens, around evening fires, and beneath cherry trees that returned faithfully with every passing spring. Tonight, we leave behind the famous battles and legendary heroes to discover something far more intimate: the everyday world of the samurai. Together, we'll journey back more than 4 centuries to explore the villages where they were born, where they raised families, where they trained both body and spirit, and where the values of loyalty, discipline, humility, and honor quietly shaped every ordinary day. So settle into a comfortable place, let the outside world slowly fade away, and allow the peaceful villages of old Japan to carry you gently into one of history's most fascinating and surprisingly human stories. Long before the samurai became legendary warriors, before shining swords and magnificent castles came to define Japan in the eyes of the world, there was a very different country. Let us travel back more than 1,000 years, to the elegant world of the Heian period. The imperial capital of Heian-kyo, today's Kyoto, was the beating heart of Japan. Wide avenues stretched toward grand palaces, where noble families lived lives filled with poetry, music, calligraphy, and elaborate court ceremonies. Every movement, every word, and every piece of clothing reflected rank and refinement. Beauty was admired almost as much as wisdom, and the greatest achievement for many aristocrats was composing a perfect poem beneath the blossoms of spring. From the palace, it appeared that the emperor ruled over a peaceful and united land. But beyond the distant mountains surrounding the capital, reality was very different. Across Japan's vast countryside, villages were separated by thick forests, winding rivers, and rugged mountains. Roads were few, communication was slow, and the authority of the imperial court grew weaker the farther one traveled from Kyoto. Local disputes became increasingly difficult to settle. Bandits attacked travelers. Rival landowners competed for territory. Farmers needed protection, yet the government often lacked the resources to defend them. In these uncertain times, wealthy landowners began hiring armed men to protect their homes, fields, and families. At first, these men were not known as samurai. They were simply skilled horsemen and archers, fighters who possessed courage, discipline, and a willingness to risk their lives in exchange for loyalty and livelihood. The word samurai itself comes from an old Japanese verb meaning to serve. And that simple idea would shape centuries of Japanese history. These warriors existed not to rule, but to serve. They served powerful families. They served local lords. They served their communities. Above all, they served with unwavering loyalty. As the years passed, these warriors became more organized. Martial skills were passed from father to son. Young boys learned to ride horses before they could fully understand politics. They practiced archery in every season, trained with wooden swords from childhood, and learned that discipline was often more important than strength. Honor slowly became as valuable as victory. Meanwhile, two powerful warrior families were quietly rising to prominence: the Minamoto and the Taira. Both claimed noble ancestry and both provided military service to the imperial court. At first, they fought to protect the interests of the emperor and influential aristocrats. Their victories brought prestige, land, and greater political influence. But power has a way of changing ambitions. As these warrior clans grew stronger, they no longer wished merely to serve the court. They wanted to shape its future. Throughout the late Heian period, political rivalries deepened. Noble families competed for influence, while military leaders gained confidence through years of campaigning. The balance between elegant court nobles and hardened provincial warriors slowly began to shift. Then came the first great conflicts, the Hogan Rebellion, soon followed by the Heiji Rebellion. Although these civil wars lasted only a short time, they revealed something that Japan had never witnessed before. Military strength could determine political power. Swords could decide the future of the nation just as surely as imperial decrees. Among the victors emerged the Taira clan under the leadership of Taira no Kiyomori, who became one of the most powerful men Japan had ever known. For a brief period it seemed that the Taira would dominate the country forever. Yet history is rarely so simple. Far from the capital, the defeated Minamoto clan patiently rebuilt its strength. Young warriors who had survived exile grew into experienced leaders. They remembered the loss of their families, the humiliation of defeat, and the dream of restoring their name. Their opportunity finally arrived with the Genpei War, one of the most famous conflicts in Japanese history. For 5 years, from mountain valleys to stormy coastlines, the Minamoto and the Taira struggled for control of the nation. Battles were fought on horseback, across rivers, and even upon the sea. Generations of warriors proved their courage, while countless ordinary villagers watched history unfold around them. When the war finally ended, the Minamoto emerged victorious. Its leader, Minamoto no Yoritomo, made a revolutionary decision. Instead of ruling from the imperial palace in Kyoto, he established his military government in Kamakura, far to the east. There, in the year 1192, he received the title of Sei Taishogun, the Great General, who subdued the barbarians. Although the emperor remained the symbolic ruler of Japan, real political authority had passed into the hands of the warrior class. For the first time, samurai were no longer simply protectors. They had become the rulers of the nation. This transformation changed Japan forever. Villages that once relied on distant officials now answered to warrior governors. Loyalty became the foundation of government. Military service became a path to honor and prosperity. Children born into samurai families inherited not only land and weapons, but also a code of duty that would shape their entire lives. The age of the samurai had truly begun. And for the next several centuries, these warrior families would leave an enduring mark on every village, every province, and every chapter of Japanese history. Our journey is only beginning. When most people imagine the samurai, they picture towering castles rising above stone walls, proud warriors standing guard beneath fluttering banners, and powerful lords commanding vast armies from magnificent halls. It is an image made famous by paintings, films, and centuries of storytelling. Yet, surprisingly, that image tells only a small part of the story. The vast majority of samurai never spent their lives inside great castles. Instead, they lived in quiet villages scattered across the Japanese countryside, places where narrow lanes wound between wooden homes, rice fields stretched toward distant mountains, and the rhythm of life was guided as much by the changing seasons as by military duty. To understand why these villages existed, we must look at how Japan was governed after the rise of the warrior class. When Minamoto no Yoritomo established the first shogunate, political power gradually shifted away from the imperial court and into the hands of military leaders. Over the centuries that followed, Japan became a land divided into many domains, each ruled by a powerful feudal lord known as a daimyo. These lords controlled enormous territories. Some governed fertile river valleys. Others ruled remote mountain provinces or long stretches of rugged coastline. Managing such lands was no simple task. Communication was slow. Roads were rough. Messages often took days to travel from one settlement to another. A single castle could never oversee every village, every farm, every bridge, and every mountain pass. The daimyo needed trusted men to represent them throughout their domains. Those trusted men were the samurai. Many were rewarded with parcels of land in exchange for their loyal service. These grants were not simply gifts of wealth. They carried responsibility. A samurai was expected to protect the people living there, collect taxes, maintain order, supervise agricultural production, settle disputes, and remain ready to answer his lord's call whenever conflict threatened. To fulfill these duties, samurai families established permanent communities close to the people they served. These gradually became known as samurai villages. Unlike the bustling merchant towns that developed around large castles, samurai villages were quieter and more disciplined. Every house, every road, and every open space reflected careful planning. Nothing was accidental. Many villages were built beside rivers that provided fresh water throughout the year. Others occupied gentle hills where approaching visitors could be seen from a distance. Some were surrounded by dense forests that acted as natural barriers, while others overlooked important roads connecting neighboring provinces. Location was always chosen with purpose. Defense was never far from a samurai's mind. Although Japan experienced long periods of peace, memories of war remained vivid for generations. Rival clans, bandits, and unexpected uprisings could appear with little warning. A village therefore had to be capable of protecting itself until reinforcements arrived. The roads entering many samurai villages were deliberately narrow and gently curved. An enemy could never charge straight toward the center. Sharp bends slowed advancing horsemen. High hedges and wooden fences limited visibility. Stone walls and earthen embankments provided additional protection, without making the village appear like a fortress. Even small streams and irrigation canals sometimes served a second purpose. They supplied water to the fields during peaceful seasons. During times of danger, they became natural obstacles that slowed invading forces. Yet defense was only one reason these villages existed. Their equally important purpose was administration. The samurai served as the eyes and hands of the daimyo. They kept detailed records of harvests, measured rice production, inspected irrigation systems, organized repairs to roads and bridges, and ensured that taxes reached the domain authorities. They settled disagreements between neighbors, enforced local laws, and coordinated relief whenever floods, fires, or poor harvests threatened the community. In many ways, a samurai village functioned as the local government long before modern city halls or administrative offices existed. The samurai living there were not distant rulers hidden behind palace walls. They were familiar faces. The villagers saw them walking the same roads every morning. They greeted them at shrines during festivals. They met them in the fields, at markets, and beside rivers where children played. Respect certainly existed, but so did daily interaction. Over generations, these villages developed a remarkable sense of order. Homes belonging to senior samurai often occupied the highest ground or stood closest to the administrative center. Lower-ranking warriors lived nearby, ensuring that messengers or soldiers could be summoned quickly if needed. Workshops for blacksmiths, carpenters, and armor craftsmen were carefully placed where they could support the community without disturbing its quiet atmosphere. Temples and Shinto shrines were usually positioned at important locations, offering not only spiritual guidance, but also serving as gathering places during ceremonies and times of crisis. Wide open spaces were intentionally preserved for military drills, horseback practice, and community meetings. Even the rows of trees planted along village roads had purpose. They provided shade during the summer, protected travelers from winter winds, marked important routes after heavy snowfall, and in some cases, concealed defensive positions should danger ever approach. Every element of a samurai village reflected thoughtful planning. Beauty and practicality lived side by side. The villages were peaceful enough for children to grow up safely, orderly enough for farmers to prosper, and resilient enough to withstand uncertain times. These communities became the foundation of everyday samurai life. Far from the grandeur of famous castles, it was here in modest wooden homes, surrounded by rice fields and quiet forests, that generations of warriors married, raised families, trained their children, fulfilled their duties, and quietly shaped the history of Japan. The true story of the samurai was not written only on battlefields. It was also written along these silent village roads, where discipline, responsibility, and community became inseparable parts of daily life. And it is through these villages that we can begin to understand the people behind one of history's most enduring legends. Now that we understand why these villages were built, let us leave the history books behind for a while. Instead of reading about a samurai village, let us walk through one. Imagine that it is just before sunrise, sometime during the early Edo period, more than 300 years ago. The sky is slowly changing from deep indigo to soft shades of blue and gold. A cool breeze carries the scent of damp earth and cedar wood, while a thin veil of morning mist hangs quietly over the surrounding rice fields. The village has not fully awakened. Only birds and insects break the silence. As you follow a narrow country path, the first thing you notice is the entrance to the village. Unlike the enormous gates of a castle, this gateway is simple and understated. Two sturdy wooden posts support a gently sloping roof covered with dark wooden shingles. It is not meant to impress visitors with grandeur, but to quietly mark the boundary between the outside world and a place governed by discipline, tradition, and mutual trust. Beside the gate hangs a small wooden plaque bearing the crest of the local lord. Every traveler who passes beneath it understands that they are entering a community protected by samurai. Stepping beyond the gate, your feet meet an ancient stone road. Each stone is different in shape, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Samurai in straw sandals once walked here carrying 2 swords at their side. Farmers pushed wooden carts loaded with freshly harvested rice. Children ran along these very stones chasing dragonflies during warm summer afternoons. The road does not run perfectly straight. Instead, it bends gently around houses and gardens, revealing only small portions of the village at a time. This design is no accident. Curved streets slow strangers, improve security, and create countless quiet corners where life unfolds naturally. As you continue walking, traditional wooden houses begin to appear on both sides of the road. Their dark timber frames have weathered countless seasons of rain and snow. Thick wooden beams support gently curved roofs covered with clay tiles. Sliding paper doors remain closed against the cool morning air, while delicate bamboo blinds sway softly in the breeze. Smoke rises lazily from a few chimneys. Someone is already preparing the morning meal. Perhaps warm rice, perhaps miso soup, perhaps freshly grilled fish caught only yesterday. Although these homes appear modest from the outside, every detail reflects remarkable craftsmanship. Joinery holds the wooden beams together without large iron nails. Wide eaves protect the walls from heavy rain, while carefully polished verandas overlook peaceful gardens. Between many of the homes stand sturdy earthen walls. Their warm brown surfaces seem almost alive beneath the morning light. Built from layers of packed earth mixed with straw, these walls protect families from strong winds, summer heat, and the ever-present danger of fire. More importantly, they provide privacy. Behind them, everyday life continues unseen. Children learn to write. Mothers prepare meals. Grandparents tell stories beside glowing charcoal braziers. The quiet dignity of the village is preserved behind these humble walls. Further ahead, tall bamboo groves begin to line the roadside. Their slender green stalks rise gracefully toward the sky, swaying together whenever the wind passes through. The gentle rustling creates a sound unlike any other, soft, rhythmic, almost musical. For generations, bamboo has been one of Japan's greatest gifts. It provides fencing baskets, water pipes, tools, fishing poles, and even practice swords for young warriors. Here it also serves another purpose. The dense groves conceal parts of the village from distant eyes while slowing anyone attempting to approach unnoticed. As the path descends slightly, you hear the gentle sound of flowing water. Soon a clear mountain stream appears beside the road. Its water is astonishingly pure. Small fish dart between smooth stones beneath the surface, while fallen maple leaves drift quietly downstream. Villagers gather here every morning. Some wash vegetables, others rinse wooden buckets. Children splash happily in the shallows during warmer months. For the samurai, the stream is more than beautiful scenery. It supplies drinking water, nourishes nearby rice fields, and provides an essential resource should fire ever threaten the village. The road continues until it reaches a small wooden bridge. Its polished planks creak softly beneath your footsteps. Simple wooden railings frame the crossing, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands over the centuries. Stopping halfway across, you look back toward the village. The rooftops emerge gently through the morning mist. Temple bells echo faintly across the valley. A rooster announces the beginning of another ordinary day. It is difficult to imagine that men trained for war call this peaceful place home. Beyond the bridge, a carefully tended bonsai garden catches your attention. Rows of miniature pine, maple, and juniper trees sit quietly upon wooden stands. Some have been shaped for decades, each branch carefully guided by patient hands. To outsiders, These tiny trees may seem merely decorative, yet for the samurai, tending bonsai is an exercise in discipline. It teaches patience, balance, restraint, the same qualities required to master the sword. Every carefully trimmed branch reflects the belief that true strength begins with self-control. Nearby, the unmistakable scent of horses fills the cool air. A wooden stable stands beneath the shade of tall trees. Several strong horses quietly chew fresh hay while stable hands brush their coats and inspect their hooves. For the samurai, horses are not simply animals. They are trusted companions. For centuries, mounted archery has been one of the highest military skills in Japan. A warrior's horse carries him into battle, delivers urgent messages across mountains, and often determines whether he survives the day. The animals receive constant care, and their stables are kept remarkably clean. Finally, toward the edge of the village stands one of its most important buildings. The granary. At first glance, it appears surprisingly plain. A sturdy wooden structure raised above the ground on thick pillars. Its elevated floor protects precious rice from damp soil, rats, insects, and seasonal floods. Inside are neatly stacked sacks of rice, the true wealth of feudal Japan. Rice feeds every family, pays taxes, rewards loyal service, supports soldiers during campaigns, and sustains the village through long winters or poor harvests. Protecting this storehouse is as important as guarding any fortress. As you stand quietly among these peaceful buildings, you begin to understand something remarkable. This village was never designed simply as a place to live. Every road has purpose. Every wall has meaning. Every stream, every bridge, every stable, every garden, and every granary contributes to a carefully balanced community where beauty and practicality exist side by side. The samurai who lived here were certainly prepared for war. But every morning before drawing a sword, they first walked these same stone roads, crossed these same wooden bridges, heard these same temple bells, and greeted the same neighbors. Long before they became legends, they were simply people living together in one extraordinary village. And as the morning sun finally rises above the surrounding hills, its golden light washes over every rooftop, every bamboo grove, and every ancient stone beneath your feet, inviting us to continue our journey deeper into the quiet, enduring world of the samurai. Leaving the quiet stone road behind, you stop in front of one of the village's finest homes. From the outside it appears remarkably modest. There are no towering towers, no glittering decorations, no symbols of excessive wealth. Instead, the house seems to blend naturally into its surroundings, as though it has always belonged here. Dark wooden beams have slowly weathered beneath centuries of rain and sunshine, while the gently curved roof stretches outward to shelter the walls from every season. Moss grows softly between the stones near the entrance, and a carefully swept path leads toward the front door. This is the home of a samurai family. To modern eyes, it may seem surprisingly simple, but every beam, every doorway, and every empty space has been designed with purpose. Before entering, you quietly remove your shoes. This small act is more than a matter of cleanliness. It is a gesture of respect. As your feet touch the smooth wooden floor of the entrance hall, known as the Genkan, the sounds of the outside world begin to fade away. The voices of birds become softer. The wind seems more distant. Inside there is only stillness. A gentle fragrance of cedar wood fills the air. The house almost seems to breathe. Stepping farther inside, you arrive upon one of the defining features of every traditional samurai home. Tatami. The floor is covered with thick woven mats made from rice straw and soft rush grass. They feel slightly springy beneath your feet, providing warmth during the winter and coolness throughout the humid Japanese summer. Each mat is carefully measured. Each corner aligns perfectly with the next. Even the arrangement of the tatami follows long-established customs, reflecting harmony and balance, rather than decoration alone. For the samurai, order began with the home itself. Walking across the room, you notice that there are very few permanent walls. Instead, elegant sliding doors made from delicate wooden frames and translucent white paper quietly separate one room from another. These are the famous shoji doors. Morning sunlight filters gently through the paper, filling every room with a soft golden glow. The light never feels harsh. Instead, it spreads evenly across the floor, creating an atmosphere of remarkable peace. When the weather is pleasant, the shoji are slid open, allowing fresh mountain air to flow effortlessly through the house. Nature and architecture become one continuous space. Nothing feels closed. Nothing feels confined. Your eyes are naturally drawn toward the garden beyond. Just outside the open veranda lies a small Zen garden. It is not large, yet somehow it feels endless. White gravel has been carefully raked into gentle waves, representing flowing water. A few carefully placed stones rise like distant islands within a calm sea. A single twisted pine tree leans gracefully toward the morning light, while patches of vibrant moss soften the edges of ancient rocks. Nothing here exists by accident. Every stone has been chosen. Every grain of sand has been arranged with patience. For the samurai, this garden is not merely decoration. It is a place for quiet reflection. Here, after long hours of training or difficult decisions, the mind can become as still as the landscape before it. Returning inside, you enter the largest room in the house. This is the reception room. Guests are welcomed here with quiet dignity rather than lavish display. Against one wall stands a simple alcove known as the tokonoma. Inside hangs a beautifully brushed scroll of calligraphy, perhaps displaying a single character such as honor, peace, or harmony. Beneath it rests a carefully arranged flower display, consisting of only a few seasonal branches. The decoration is intentionally minimal. The empty space surrounding each object is considered just as important as the object itself. Silence, too, is part of the design. When respected visitors arrive, everyone knows exactly where to sit according to age and rank. Conversations are calm. Movements are measured. Even pouring tea becomes an expression of courtesy. Beyond the reception room lie the family's sleeping quarters. Unlike modern bedrooms, these rooms remain almost empty during the day. There are no permanent beds, no heavy furniture. At night, soft cotton futons are carefully unfolded across the tatami mats. Each morning, they are folded away again and stored neatly inside wooden cupboards, transforming the sleeping room back into open living space. This simple routine reflects an important philosophy. A room should adapt to the needs of the moment. Nothing should occupy space unnecessarily. Every object has its proper time and place. Nearby is perhaps the most peaceful room in the entire house, the tea room. Smaller than you might expect, its low entrance requires every visitor to bow before entering. Whether nobleman or farmer, everyone lowers themselves in exactly the same way. Inside, the atmosphere is almost sacred. An iron kettle gently warms over glowing charcoal. The faint aroma of fresh green tea drifts through the still air. The tea ceremony practiced here is far more than preparing a drink. For the samurai, it is a discipline of the spirit. Every movement is deliberate. Every gesture is slow. Every silence carries meaning. For a brief moment, the worries of war, politics, and daily responsibilities disappear. There is only the sound of boiling water, the scent of tea, and the quiet presence of another human being. Not far from the tea room is a place few visitors ever see. A modest wooden cabinet stands against the wall. Inside rests the samurai's most treasured possession, his swords. The long katana and the shorter wakizashi lie carefully displayed upon polished wooden rests. Their blades are spotless, protected by layers of finely crafted lacquered scabbards. They are never left carelessly on the floor or treated as ordinary tools. To a samurai, the sword is often described as the soul of the warrior. It represents duty rather than violence, responsibility rather than pride. When the warrior returns home, removing his sword symbolizes leaving the dangers of the outside world behind and becoming once again a husband, a father, and a member of the household. Finally, at the quietest corner of the home, you discover a small family altar. Simple wooden shelves hold ancestral tablets carefully inscribed with the names of those who came before. Fresh flowers stand beside small bowls of rice and cups of tea offered with gratitude. Thin strands of incense drift upward in delicate curls, filling the room with a gentle fragrance. Each morning, members of the family pause here for a few quiet moments. They bow their heads, offer thanks, remember the sacrifices of their ancestors, and remind themselves that they are only one generation in a much longer story. Honor is not inherited through blood alone. It must be renewed every day through one's actions. As you slowly walk back toward the entrance, taking one last look across the tatami rooms, the softly glowing shoji screens, the peaceful Zen garden and the silent family altar, you begin to understand that this house was never merely a place to sleep. It was a school of discipline, a sanctuary of reflection, a home where every object, every room, and every daily ritual quietly taught the values that defined the samurai for centuries. Before a warrior ever stepped onto a battlefield, he first learned how to live within these peaceful wooden walls. And perhaps that is where the true spirit of the samurai was born, not in war, but at home. The stories of the samurai that have traveled across the world are often filled with duels beneath cherry blossoms, dramatic battles, and legendary acts of courage. Movies show flashing swords. Books celebrate famous victories. Paintings capture warriors charging fearlessly into combat. Yet if you had visited a samurai village during one of Japan's long periods of peace, you might have been surprised by what you found. There would be no armies marching through the streets, no battles waiting beyond the hills, no constant sound of steel against steel. Instead, you would witness something much quieter, the ordinary rhythm of everyday life. For most samurai, most days were not spent fighting. They were spent preparing, serving, learning, and living. Let us spend one peaceful day alongside a samurai family. The day begins long before the sun appears above the mountains. The village still sleeps beneath a blanket of darkness. Only the distant call of an owl and the gentle murmur of the nearby stream disturb the silence. A faint glow begins to appear inside one wooden house as a paper lantern is quietly lit. The samurai is already awake. Rising before dawn is more than a habit. It is a discipline. The cool morning air immediately sharpens the senses, while the silence offers a moment to prepare both body and mind for the responsibilities ahead. Before speaking to anyone else, he pauses for quiet reflection. Sitting cross-legged upon the tatami, he closes his eyes. His breathing slows. The world outside fades away. For several peaceful minutes, there is no thought of duty, politics, or conflict, only stillness. Although not every samurai practiced Zen Buddhism in exactly the same way, meditation became an important part of warrior culture for many generations. It taught patience instead of haste, clarity instead of confusion, and calmness in moments of uncertainty. The greatest victory, they believed, was often mastery over one's own mind. As the first light touches the horizon, meditation ends. Training begins. Outside, the morning mist still hangs above the fields as the samurai steps into the practice yard carrying a wooden sword. His movements are slow, deliberate, controlled. Every strike follows the one before with almost effortless precision. There is no anger, no shouting, only the steady rhythm of breathing footsteps and wood cutting through cool morning air. He repeats the same movements again and again, not because they are exciting, but because perfection is born through repetition. Nearby stands a simple rack holding bows and arrows. Swordsmanship alone is not enough. For centuries, mounted archery remained one of the highest skills expected of a samurai. Taking his long bamboo bow, he walks toward a straw target positioned at the edge of the training ground. Drawing the bow requires remarkable strength. The string pulls back smoothly. There is a brief moment of complete silence. Then, the arrow flies. It disappears into the center of the target with a satisfying thud. Again and again, every shot teaches focus rather than force. As the village gradually awakens, another trusted companion waits nearby, his horse. Inside the stable, the animal lifts its head upon hearing familiar footsteps. The samurai gently brushes its coat, checks its hooves, replaces fresh water, and prepares its morning feed. This is not work left entirely to servants. A warrior's horse is a loyal partner whose well-being may one day determine life or death. Respect is shown through careful daily attention. By now, smoke rises from chimneys throughout the village. Breakfast is simple but nourishing. Steamed rice, miso soup, grilled fish, pickled vegetables, green tea. The family gathers quietly before beginning the day's work. Conversation is calm. There is no unnecessary noise. Every meal offers another opportunity to express gratitude for the harvest and for the peaceful morning they have been given. Soon afterward, duty calls. Contrary to popular belief, many samurai spend far more time with documents than with swords. The local lord depends upon them not only as warriors, but also as administrators. Throughout the morning, the samurai visits nearby farms, inspects irrigation canals, reviews harvest records, settles disagreements between neighbors, and listens carefully to the concerns of local villagers. Taxes must be recorded accurately. Roads require maintenance. Bridges need inspection after heavy rains. Messengers arrive carrying reports from neighboring villages. Every task contributes to the stability of the domain. A peaceful province is often the result of countless small responsibilities carried out faithfully every day. As the afternoon sun climbs higher, the samurai returns home. Waiting there are his children, perhaps a young son eager to hold a wooden practice sword. Perhaps a curious daughter asking questions about the stories of their ancestors. The lessons begin. Swordsmanship is introduced slowly and safely. The children first learn how to bow respectfully before touching a weapon. They learn balance before strength, discipline before skill. Most importantly, they learn that a sword exists to protect, never to intimidate. Education extends far beyond martial training. Later in the afternoon, the family gathers around wooden desks. Sheets of handmade paper are carefully placed before them. An inkstone is gently moistened. A brush is dipped into rich black ink. Now begins the quiet art of calligraphy. Each stroke must flow naturally from the heart. Writing is not simply communication. It is another form of discipline. A wandering mind creates uneven lines. A peaceful mind creates graceful characters. Many samurai believed that beautiful handwriting reflected inner character just as clearly as expert swordsmanship. When the calligraphy lesson ends, books replaced brushes. Contrary to popular imagination, samurai were expected to cultivate both martial ability and intellectual understanding. Their libraries often contained works on history, philosophy, poetry, military strategy, Confucian teachings, and classical Chinese literature. Some spent hours reading ancient texts, others copied poems by candlelight. Many composed poetry of their own while watching the changing seasons from the veranda. To them, wisdom strengthened the sword far more than brute strength alone. As evening approaches, the pace of the village begins to slow once again. Farmers return from the fields. Children laugh softly in narrow streets. Temple bells echo across the valley. Warm light glows behind paper shoji screens. The samurai removes his swords before stepping fully into his home. The warrior gives way to the husband, the father, the son. Together, the family shares the evening meal, exchanges stories from the day, and offers quiet thanks before the ancestral altar. Outside, darkness gradually settles over the rooftops. The village grows silent. Tomorrow will likely look very much the same. Another morning before dawn. Another meditation. Another training session. Another day of service. And that is perhaps the greatest surprise of all. The true life of a samurai was rarely defined by spectacular battles. Instead, it was shaped by thousands of ordinary mornings, quiet responsibilities, patient lessons, and peaceful evenings. History remembers the wars, but character was built in the moments between them. It was in these simple daily routines that generations of samurai forged not only their bodies, but also the discipline, humility, and sense of duty that would make them one of the most enduring warrior classes the world has ever known. As we continue our quiet walk through the samurai village, let us pause for a moment and look beyond the warriors whose names fill the history books. It is easy to imagine that every important story in a samurai village belonged to the men, the fathers who trained with swords, the sons who rode horses, the lords who governed distant provinces. Yet behind every one of these stories stood women whose strength was often quieter but no less remarkable. Without them, the samurai household could never have endured. As the village awakens beneath the gentle morning sun, the first sounds coming from many homes are not those of swords striking wooden targets. Instead, they are the soft footsteps of women beginning another day's work. A fire is carefully lit, rice is washed, water is drawn from the nearby stream. Sliding shoji doors are opened to welcome the fresh morning air. The house slowly comes to life. The wife of a samurai carried responsibilities far greater than simply caring for the home. She was the manager of the household. Every sack of rice stored in the granary, every piece of clothing, every household expense, every servant's duty, every seasonal preparation, all required careful planning. During times when her husband was called away to serve his lord, sometimes for weeks, or even months, the entire household rested upon her shoulders. She organized supplies for winter, oversaw repairs to the house, supervised workers, welcomed important visitors, maintained family finances, and ensured that life continued peacefully until the samurai returned. In many ways, she governed the household with the same discipline that her husband governed the village. Education was another responsibility of enormous importance. Children did not learn values only from their fathers. Much of their earliest education came from their mothers. Young boys were taught courtesy before they ever held a sword. Young girls learned compassion alongside responsibility. Every child learned to bow respectfully, to speak honestly, to value humility over pride. Stories of honorable ancestors were shared around evening fires. Poems were memorized. Seasonal traditions were carefully preserved. The lessons were gentle, but they lasted a lifetime. A samurai child was expected to grow not only into a capable adult, but into a person whose character reflected the honor of the entire family. The mother became the first teacher. and perhaps the most influential one. Despite this peaceful image, life in feudal Japan was never completely free from danger. Bandits sometimes appeared without warning. Rival clans occasionally launched sudden attacks. When the men were away serving their lord, the village could not simply remain defenseless. For this reason, many samurai women received martial training from an early age. Their weapon of choice was usually not the katana. Instead, they mastered the graceful yet deadly naginata. With its long wooden shaft and elegantly curved blade, the naginata allowed a defender to keep attackers at a distance while making full use of balance, timing and precision. Watching an experienced woman practice the naginata was said to resemble watching flowing water. Every movement appeared calm, every step graceful, yet hidden within that elegance was extraordinary skill. Training was never intended to encourage violence. It existed so that a family, a home, or a village could be protected if no one else remained. The women of samurai households learned to remain calm under pressure, to act decisively, and to defend those entrusted to their care. Should danger ever reach the village gates, they were prepared to stand alongside fathers, husbands, brothers and sons. History remembers several women whose courage became legendary. Among the most celebrated was Tomo Gozen. Living during the turbulent Genpei War in the late 12th century, she was renowned for both her exceptional beauty and her remarkable skill on the battlefield. Ancient chronicles describe her as an outstanding horsewoman, an expert archer, and a fearless swordswoman who rode into battle beside some of Japan's greatest warriors. Whether every detail of those stories is historically certain or partly shaped by legend, Tomo Gozen has endured for centuries as a symbol of courage and determination. Another extraordinary figure was Nakano Takiko. Centuries later, during the Boshin War of the 19th century, she led a group of women armed with naginata in the defense of Aizu. Though greatly outnumbered, she fought with remarkable bravery until the very end. Her story became one of the final great examples of the samurai spirit before Japan entered the modern age. Yet for every famous name remembered by history, there were thousands of women whose names have quietly disappeared. They never commanded armies. They never appeared in official chronicles. But each morning they prepared meals before sunrise, raised children with patience, maintained peaceful homes, supported aging parents, comforted frightened families during uncertain times, and quietly preserved the traditions that defined samurai life across generations. Their achievements were measured not by victories in battle, but by the stability of their households, by the wisdom of their children, by the harmony they created within their communities. As evening falls once again over the village, warm lantern light glows softly through paper windows. Inside one home, a mother patiently helps her young son practice calligraphy. In another, an elderly grandmother tells stories of ancestors whose honor must never be forgotten. Elsewhere, a woman carefully polishes a naginata before returning it to its place beside the household altar, not because she expects to use it tomorrow, but because preparedness itself is part of responsibility. Outside, the village remains peaceful. Temple bells echo gently across the valley. The scent of wood smoke drifts into the cool night air. Everything appears calm. Yet beneath this quiet beauty lives a community strengthened, not only by the discipline of its warriors, but also by the resilience, wisdom, and quiet courage of its women. The story of the samurai was never written by swords alone. It was also written by steady hands preparing meals before dawn, by gentle voices teaching children right from wrong, by determined hearts willing to defend home and family when every other hope had faded. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson these villages still offer us today. True strength is not always the loudest. Sometimes it is found in those who protect, nurture, and endure day after day, generation after generation without ever asking history to remember their names. As the first light of morning spreads across the rooftops of the village, another day quietly begins not only for the adults, but also for the youngest members of the samurai household. Listen carefully. You will not hear the clash of steel, nor the thunder of galloping horses. Instead, you hear the gentle laughter of children, the soft voices of parents, and the distant ringing of a temple bell welcoming a new day. Every great samurai was once a child. Long before he carried 2 swords at his waist, long before he swore loyalty to his lord or stepped onto a battlefield, he first learned life's simplest lessons within the peaceful walls of his family home. For a samurai child, education began almost as soon as he could walk. But the first lesson was not how to fight, it was how to behave. Each morning children were taught to bow respectfully to their parents and grandparents. They learned to greet visitors with humility, to remove their shoes neatly before entering the house, and to speak with courtesy regardless of a person's social status. These small gestures may seem ordinary, yet within the samurai household, they carried deep meaning. Respect was considered the foundation upon which every other virtue would be built. Without respect, courage could become arrogance. Without humility, strength could become cruelty. Parents understood that character was formed through countless small habits repeated every single day. Only after these lessons became second nature did martial training slowly begin. At first, there were no sharp blades. Young boys practiced with light wooden swords called bokken. The weapons were simple, but the lessons were profound. The children were taught how to stand, how to breathe, how to balance their weight, how to bow before and after practice. Winning was never the primary goal. Self-control was. If a child became angry or impatient, training often stopped immediately. A sword held by an undisciplined mind was considered far more dangerous than a dull blade. As they grew older, their training gradually became more demanding. The practice yard echoed with the steady rhythm of wooden swords meeting one another, not violently, but carefully. Every strike was corrected, every mistake patiently explained. The purpose was not to create fearless fighters overnight. It was to build confidence through years of steady practice. Another important skill awaited them outside the village: horseback riding. For centuries, mounted warriors had formed the backbone of many samurai armies, making horsemanship an essential part of a young warrior's education. The first lessons were surprisingly gentle. Children learned how to approach a horse calmly, how to stroke its neck, and how to earn its trust before ever climbing into the saddle. Only then did they begin learning to ride. At first, they simply walked along quiet paths beneath the watchful eyes of experienced instructors. Later came trotting, then faster riding. Eventually, some would combine horseback riding with archery, a skill requiring extraordinary balance, concentration, and harmony between rider and horse. Yet physical training occupied only part of the day. When practice ended, the children returned indoors, where another equally important lesson awaited them: calligraphy. Sitting quietly before low wooden desks, they carefully prepared ink by grinding an ink stick against a smooth stone with a few drops of water. The process itself required patience. Only after the ink was ready did the writing begin. Each brush stroke demanded complete concentration. If the mind wandered, the characters immediately revealed it. A crooked line reflected impatience. A trembling stroke revealed hesitation. Beautiful handwriting was not merely admired for its appearance. It demonstrated inner discipline. Many samurai believed that the same steady hand capable of writing graceful characters would also remain steady in moments of great difficulty. Books followed brushes. Children studied poetry, history, classical Chinese texts, philosophy, and the teachings of Confucian scholars. They learned about wise rulers, loyal retainers, and honorable ancestors. Stories were not simply entertainment. They served as examples of how one should live. A child listening beside a lantern at night was quietly absorbing values that would guide him for the rest of his life. Perhaps the most important lessons, however, could never be found inside any book. They came through everyday example. Children watched how their father treated neighbors with courtesy. They observed how their mother cared for elderly relatives with patience. They noticed how adults kept promises even when doing so required personal sacrifice. These daily actions became silent teachers. Little by little, the principles that would later become associated with Bushidō began taking root: loyalty, integrity, courage, compassion, respect, self-discipline, honor. Although the formal idea of Bushidō developed gradually over many centuries, the values it represented were already being passed from one generation to the next through ordinary family life. A child learned that telling the truth mattered even when no one was watching, that helping others brought greater satisfaction than seeking praise, that courage sometimes meant admitting one's mistakes, that strength existed to protect the weak, never to frighten them. As evening approached, the pace of learning slowed. Training swords were carefully returned to their wooden racks. Brushes were washed and placed neatly aside. Books were closed. The family gathered together for the evening meal. After dinner, grandparents often became the evening storytellers. They spoke of ancestors whose loyalty had protected the family through difficult times. They recalled moments of sacrifice, kindness, perseverance, quiet courage. Children listened with wide eyes as lantern light flickered gently across the room. These stories connected them to generations they would never meet. Before going to sleep, many children bowed once more before the family altar, offering quiet respect to those who had come before them. Only then did the house gradually fall silent. Outside, the village rested beneath a sky filled with stars. Tomorrow would bring another day of lessons, another chance to improve, another small step toward adulthood. Looking back across centuries, it becomes clear that the making of a samurai did not begin with armor, war, or famous battles. It began with simple greetings offered each morning, with patient brushstrokes across white paper, with respectful bows, with honest words, with quiet acts of kindness repeated day after day. The greatest weapon a young samurai ever carried was not his sword. It was the character that his parents, teachers, and community patiently shaped from childhood. And perhaps that is why the villages of old Japan produced not only skilled warriors, but generations of men and women whose lives were guided by discipline, humility, and honor long before they ever faced the challenges of the wider world. As we have wandered through the quiet streets of this samurai village, we have seen many things. We have walked along ancient stone roads, stepped inside peaceful wooden homes, watched children learning calligraphy, seen women tending their families with quiet strength, observed warriors practicing their swords before sunrise. Yet beneath all of these daily routines lies something invisible, something far more powerful than any weapon. It cannot be held in one's hand. It cannot be locked inside a storehouse, and it cannot be seen by the eye alone. It is called Bushidō. Often translated as the way of the warrior, Bushidō was never simply a collection of rules. It was a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of becoming the kind of person others could trust. While the formal idea of Bushidō evolved gradually over centuries, especially during Japan's long era of peace, under the Tokugawa shogunate, its guiding virtues had long been woven into samurai life. In truth, Bushidō was not only the soul of the warrior, it became the soul of the village itself. The first of these virtues was honor. For a samurai, honor could never be bought with wealth or inherited through family name alone. It had to be earned every single day. A person's reputation was built through countless small actions, keeping one's promises, speaking truthfully, fulfilling one's responsibilities even when no one else was watching. The villagers understood that once honor was lost, it was painfully difficult to regain. So they guarded it as carefully as they guarded their homes. Next came loyalty. Perhaps no value is more closely associated with the samurai. Loyalty meant remaining faithful to one's lord, one's family, and one's community even during times of hardship. But loyalty was not blind obedience. It was built upon mutual trust. A lord depended upon his retainers. Retainers depended upon one another. Families depended upon neighbors. The village itself could only prosper when every person fulfilled the duties entrusted to them. Loyalty connected every household like threads woven into a single fabric. Without it, the community would slowly unravel. Then there was courage. Modern stories often imagine courage as charging fearlessly into battle. The samurai understood it differently. True courage was doing what was right even when fear remained. It was admitting a mistake, protecting someone weaker than yourself, standing firm during difficult times, remaining calm when others panicked. Sometimes the bravest act required no sword at all. It simply required a steady heart. Closely connected to courage was integrity. The samurai believed that words and actions should never be separated. Promises carried weight, agreements were honored, justice was expected to be fair rather than convenient. Children quickly learned that honesty mattered far more than appearances. A beautiful reputation built upon lies could never endure. Only truth created lasting respect. Yet Bushidō was never intended to produce cold or ruthless warriors. Compassion held an equally important place. Strength existed to protect, not to dominate. A respected samurai treated farmers, craftsmen, merchants, travelers, and even strangers with dignity. Many villages survived difficult winters because with greater resources, quietly helped those in need. Acts of generosity were rarely performed for recognition. They were simply understood as part of one's duty to the community. Mercy, when wisely given, was considered another expression of strength. Perhaps one of the most difficult virtues to master was self-control. Every day presented opportunities for anger, frustration, pride, fear. Yet the samurai believed the greatest battle took place within the human heart. Anyone could lose their temper. Far fewer could remain calm. Meditation, calligraphy, tea ceremonies, even tending a garden, all became ways of training the mind to remain balanced regardless of circumstance. Mastering oneself was considered the highest form of victory. Finally came respect. Respect flowed in every direction throughout the village. Children bowed to their parents. Students honored their teachers. Warriors showed courtesy to worthy opponents. Families remembered their ancestors. Villagers cared for sacred shrines and temples. Even nature itself received respect. Mountains, rivers, ancient trees, the changing seasons. Everything reminded people that they belonged to something far greater than themselves. Respect was not a sign of weakness. It was a recognition that every life possessed value. When these virtues came together, they shaped more than individual character. They shaped an entire community. Bushidō influenced how homes were built, how children were educated, how disagreements were settled. how festivals were celebrated, how justice was carried out, how neighbors treated one another. The village became peaceful not because conflict never existed, but because its people continually practiced the values that prevented conflict from growing. As evening settles once more across the rooftops, warm lantern light glows behind paper shoji screens. Families gather together for supper. Children quietly thank their parents. A grandfather tells stories of ancestors whose lives reflected honor more than victory. Outside, a samurai pauses before entering his home. He removes his swords, bows gently toward the family altar, and leaves behind the burdens of duty before embracing the quiet life of husband and father. No one speaks the word Bushidō aloud. They do not need to. It lives in every respectful greeting, every honest promise, every patient lesson, every compassionate act, every decision to place duty above selfish desire. That is why the spirit of Bushidō endured for so many generations. It was never confined to castles or battlefields. It lived in kitchens where families shared simple meals, in schoolrooms where children learned their first characters, in gardens where elderly hands patiently raked gravel into perfect patterns, and along these peaceful village roads where ordinary people quietly practiced extraordinary values. The swords of the samurai have long since fallen silent. Many of their villages have changed with the passing centuries. Yet the ideals that guided their lives continue to speak across time, not through the sound of steel, but through the enduring reminder that true strength begins within the heart, and that the greatest legacy any community can leave behind is not its victories, but the character of the people who call it home. As the morning sun climbs higher above the samurai village, let us leave the quiet family home for a moment and enter a building few outsiders were ever invited to see. The wooden doors slide open with a gentle sound. Inside, the room is cool and surprisingly peaceful. Weapons rest neatly upon polished wooden racks. Spears stand upright against the walls. Elegant bows hang beside carefully crafted quivers. Swords lie silently inside lacquered scabbards, their blades hidden from view. There is no feeling of chaos, no sense of violence. Everything is arranged with care and respect. To the samurai, these were not simply instruments of war. They were tools of responsibility. Each carried its own history, its own purpose, its own spirit. Today, when people think of the samurai, one weapon immediately comes to mind: the katana. Its gently curved blade has become one of the most recognizable swords in human history. Master swordsmiths spent weeks, sometimes months, forging a single blade. Layer upon layer of steel was folded, heated, hammered, and polished until the sword possessed extraordinary sharpness and remarkable resilience. Yet the katana was much more than a weapon. Many samurai believed it was the very soul of the warrior. A sword demanded respect. It was never drawn carelessly, never displayed merely to impress others. To unsheath a katana without good reason was considered deeply dishonorable. Most of the time, it remained peacefully at its owner's side, reminding him that true strength lay in self-control rather than violence. Beside the katana rests a shorter companion, the wakizashi. Although smaller, it was no less important. Together, the katana and wakizashi formed the famous pair known as the daisho, literally meaning the long and the short. The wakizashi accompanied the samurai everywhere, even inside buildings where the longer katana was often left at the entrance. It served as a weapon for close quarters, but it also symbolized the warrior's constant readiness. Whether attending a formal meeting or visiting another household, the wakizashi remained close at hand, quietly reflecting both duty and trust. Nearby lies an even smaller blade, the tanto. At first glance, it resembles a beautifully crafted knife rather than a sword. Yet appearances can be deceiving. The tanto was designed for situations where larger weapons became impractical. It was carried by many samurai, and was also used by women within samurai households for self-defense. Its compact size made it easy to wear without restricting movement, while its finely crafted blade reflected the same extraordinary craftsmanship found in larger swords. Moving farther along the room, your eyes are drawn upward. Several tall bamboo bows hang gracefully upon the wall. These are yumi. Long before swords became the defining symbol of the samurai, the bow was often their most respected weapon. Unlike the symmetrical bows seen in many other cultures, the Japanese yumi has an unusually long shape with the grip positioned below the center. This unique design allowed warriors to shoot effectively while standing on the ground or riding horseback. Mounted archery demanded remarkable balance. The horse galloped beneath the rider. The target appeared only for an instant, yet the arrow had to fly with absolute precision. For centuries, the finest warriors measured their skill not by swordsmanship alone, but by their mastery of the bow. Resting nearby is one of the most elegant weapons in the entire collection, the naginata. Its long wooden shaft supports a beautifully curved blade that catches the morning light. Watching an experienced warrior wield a naginata was said to resemble watching flowing water. Wide circular movements kept opponents at a distance while allowing swift, graceful attacks. The weapon became especially associated with women of samurai families, who trained to defend their homes whenever the men were away. But many male warriors also carried the naginata onto battlefields, where its long reach proved highly effective against mounted enemies. Standing beside the naginata are rows of sturdy spears known as yari, simple in appearance, yet incredibly versatile. Some possessed straight blades, others featured cross-shaped points or longer cutting edges. Unlike swords, which required close combat, the yari allowed warriors to strike from greater distance, while maintaining tight formations. As warfare grew larger and armies expanded, disciplined lines of spearmen became increasingly important. Thousands of yari pointed toward an advancing enemy created a nearly impenetrable wall of steel. The weapon demanded teamwork more than individual heroics. Every soldier depended upon the discipline of those standing beside him. Then, in the middle of the 16th century, something entirely new arrived upon the shores of Japan. Came aboard Portuguese ships. It made an unfamiliar sound unlike arrows or swords, and it would forever change Japanese warfare. The matchlock musket. Known in Japan as the Tanegashima, this firearm was quickly studied, copied, and improved by Japanese craftsmen. At first, many warriors viewed the new weapon with curiosity. Some even regarded it with suspicion. After all, could a loud machine truly possess the honor of a finely crafted sword? Yet military leaders soon recognized its tremendous potential. Unlike years of training required to master archery, a soldier could learn to fire a matchlock in a relatively short time. During famous battles such as Nagashino, organized ranks of musketeers demonstrated just how devastating coordinated gunfire could become. Smoke drifted across the battlefield. Thunder echoed through the valleys. A new age of warfare had quietly begun. Yet even as firearms spread across Japan, they never completely replaced the older weapons. The sword remained the symbol of the samurai. The bow preserved ancient traditions. The spear continued to dominate large formations. Each weapon served its own purpose. Each reflected a different chapter in the evolution of the warrior class. As you slowly leave the armory, one thought becomes impossible to ignore. The greatness of the samurai was never measured by the sharpness of a blade or the length of a spear. A sword without discipline was merely steel. A bow without patience was only wood. A musket without wisdom was simply another dangerous tool. What truly distinguished the samurai was not the weapon they carried, but the character of the person carrying it. And perhaps that is why these weapons continue to fascinate the world centuries later. They are more than artifacts of war. They are silent reminders of a civilization that believed the strongest hand must always be guided by an even stronger heart. As the wooden doors quietly close behind us, the weapons once again disappear into silence, waiting patiently as they have for generations, guardians not only of history, but of the enduring spirit of the samurai. When we picture the samurai, it is easy to imagine men surrounded by wealth, magnificent armor, beautiful swords, elegant homes, faithful servants waiting at every command. It is an image repeated in countless films and stories, but the truth was often far more modest. Not every samurai was wealthy. In fact, many lived surprisingly simple lives. Some struggled to support their families, especially during long periods of peace when opportunities for military service became fewer. Others depended almost entirely upon fixed stipends paid by their lord, payments that did not always keep pace with rising prices or poor harvests. The strength of a samurai village was never measured only by the skill of its warriors. It also depended upon its fields, its craftsmen, its merchants, and the quiet rhythm of everyday work. As the morning sun rises higher above the rooftops, let us leave the residential streets and walk toward the heart of the village's economy. Beyond the last row of houses, the landscape opens into broad rice fields shimmering beneath the gentle breeze. Young green shoots sway together like waves upon a calm sea. Water flows carefully through narrow irrigation channels, reflecting clouds drifting across the sky. Rice was far more than food. It was the foundation of the entire economy. For centuries, wealth in Japan was measured not simply in coins, but in rice. Taxes were often calculated according to the expected harvest of each village. A domain's prosperity depended upon how much rice its farmers could produce, and a samurai's income was frequently expressed in koku, a traditional unit representing enough rice to feed one person for an entire year. This meant that every successful harvest strengthened the entire community, and every failed harvest brought uncertainty. Although samurai generally did not work the fields themselves, their lives remained closely connected to agriculture. They inspected irrigation canals, recorded harvests, resolved disputes over farmland, ensured that taxes were collected fairly and delivered to their lord. Good administration required understanding the rhythms of nature just as much as understanding military discipline. A wise samurai knew that a peaceful village depended first upon healthy fields. As the day continues, the narrow village roads become busier. Farmers arrive carrying baskets filled with fresh vegetables. Bundles of firewood are stacked beside wooden carts. Fishermen from nearby rivers offer their morning catch. Children weave happily between the crowds while elders greet neighbors they have known for decades. It is market day. Unlike the bustling commercial districts of great castle towns, the village market feels calm and familiar. Most people know one another by name. Conversations unfold slowly. Prices are discussed with courtesy rather than haste. Goods change hands alongside stories, laughter, and local news. Merchants occupy an interesting place within this society. According to traditional social rankings, they stood below farmers, artisans, and the warrior class because they earned their living through trade rather than producing goods directly. Yet in practice, merchants became increasingly important as Japan enjoyed centuries of peace. They transported rice, textiles, salt, paper, tools, and countless other necessities from one province to another. Without them, even the most disciplined village would struggle to thrive. Many samurai relied upon merchants more than they cared to admit. Some borrowed money during difficult years. Others purchased fine paper, quality tea, silk medicines, or books from traveling traders who regularly visited the village. Commerce quietly connected even the most remote communities to the wider world. Walking farther through the market, you hear another familiar sound, the steady rhythm of hammers striking metal. A blacksmith's workshop glows warmly despite the daylight outside. Here, skilled craftsmen continue one of Japan's most celebrated traditions, swordsmithing. Forging a samurai blade demanded extraordinary patience and precision. The steel was heated until it glowed bright orange, folded, hammered, heated again, folded once more, over and over. The process refined the metal while strengthening its structure. Days passed, sometimes weeks. Only after careful polishing did the blade reveal its beautiful flowing grain beneath the surface. Every sword carried not only the skill of its owner, but also the lifetime of experience belonging to the craftsman who created it. Nearby, another workshop appears much quieter. Sheets of handmade paper hang gently from wooden frames, drying in the afternoon breeze. Japanese paper, known as washi, was produced from the fibers of mulberry gampi, or Mitsumata plants. Its texture was remarkably strong despite its delicate appearance. This paper filled countless roles within village life. It became books, letters, official records, shoji screens, lanterns, works of art. Even the simple act of writing depended upon the careful hands of paper makers whose skills had been passed through generations. Just beyond the paper workshop comes the earthy scent of damp clay. Potters sit patiently before spinning wheels, shaping graceful bowls, teacups, storage jars, and elegant vases with practiced hands. The village pottery is neither extravagant nor ornate. Its beauty lies in simplicity. Every bowl is designed to be used, every jar to preserve food. Every teacup to accompany quiet conversations shared between family and friends. Small imperfections are not hidden. Instead, they are accepted as reminders that everything created by human hands possesses its own unique character. This appreciation for quiet imperfection would later become one of the defining qualities of Japanese aesthetics. As the afternoon slowly fades toward evening, the market begins to empty. Farmers return to their fields. Merchants load the few remaining goods onto wooden carts. Craftsmen extinguish their furnaces. The familiar sounds of work gradually give way to the peaceful stillness of approaching night. Walking back through the village, one realization quietly settles into your mind. A samurai village was never sustained by warriors alone. Its strength rested upon many hands working together. The farmer growing rice beneath the summer sun. The merchant carrying supplies across distant roads. The blacksmith shaping glowing steel. The paper maker lifting delicate fibers from clear water. The potter patiently forming clay upon a spinning wheel. Each person contributed something essential. Even the samurai, for all their discipline and authority, depended upon the labor, skill, and dedication of the people around them. Perhaps that is the greatest surprise of all. The legendary warrior standing proudly with two swords at his side did not exist apart from the village. He belonged to it. Its harvests fed him. Its craftsmen equipped him. Its merchants connected him to the outside world. Its people gave purpose to his service. And as the evening lanterns begin to glow once more behind wooden windows, the quiet economy of the samurai village comes to rest, ready to awaken again with the first light of another peaceful dawn. As evening slowly settles over the samurai village, the pace of daily life begins to soften. The fields grow quiet, the workshops close their wooden doors. The horses return to their stables. Even the steady rhythm of the blacksmith's hammer gradually fades into silence. Yet the village is far from asleep. A different kind of life is about to begin. For the people who lived here, life was never measured only by work duty or military discipline. It was also shaped by faith, by gratitude, by moments of celebration shared with neighbors beneath the changing seasons. To truly understand a samurai village, we must understand its spiritual heart. At the edge of the village, surrounded by towering cedar trees that have watched over these mountains for centuries, stands a small Shinto shrine. Its bright vermilion torii gate rises quietly against the deep green forest. A gentle breeze stirs the white paper streamers hanging from sacred ropes. The air carries the faint scent of cedar, fresh earth, and burning incense. Villagers approach the shrine one by one. Before entering, they pause at a stone basin filled with cool spring water. With quiet movements, they rinse their hands and cleanse their mouths. This simple ritual is not about washing away dirt. It is about preparing the heart. Shinto, the ancient spiritual tradition of Japan, teaches that the natural world is filled with kami, sacred spirits that dwell within mountains, rivers, forests, waterfalls, ancient trees, and even the changing seasons themselves. To the people of the village, nature was never something to conquer. It was something to respect. The towering cedar tree was more than timber. The flowing river was more than water. The mountain beyond the fields was more than stone. Each reminded them that human life formed only one small part of a much greater world. Not far from the shrine stands a quiet Buddhist temple. Its weathered wooden buildings seem almost to disappear into the surrounding forest. A bronze bell hangs beneath a heavy timber frame. As dusk approaches, a monk gently strikes it. The deep, resonant sound rolls across the valley. It lingers in the evening air long after the bell itself has fallen silent. For many samurai, Buddhism offered something different from Shinto. While Shinto celebrated harmony with nature and the blessings of daily life, Buddhism encouraged reflection upon impermanence. Everything changes. Every flower blooms before it fades. Every season passes. Every human life is temporary. Rather than causing sadness, this understanding invited gratitude. It encouraged people to treasure the present moment. Many samurai found comfort in these teachings. Knowing that life was uncertain made every peaceful morning, every shared meal, and every conversation with family feel more precious. As winter gives way to spring, the village prepares for one of its happiest celebrations, the Spring Festival. For weeks beforehand, families sweep their homes, repair wooden fences, decorate the shrine, and prepare special foods to share with neighbors. Children eagerly help hang colorful banners that flutter gently in the spring breeze. Fresh blossoms begin opening throughout the valley. The long, quiet winter has finally come to an end. On the morning of the festival, the village awakens with unusual excitement. People wear their finest clothing. Laughter echoes along the stone roads. Merchants display seasonal treats. Farmers offer thanks for another planting season. The atmosphere is joyful without becoming hurried. It is a celebration of renewal, of hope, of another year beginning together. Soon music fills the village square. The gentle sound of bamboo flutes is joined by the steady beat of traditional drums. Villagers gather to watch graceful dances that have been performed for generations. Every movement carries meaning. Some dances honor the spirits believed to protect the harvest. Others celebrate heroic ancestors or give thanks for peaceful years without war. Children watch with wide eyes as elders pass these traditions from one generation to the next. No written book could preserve culture as beautifully as these living performances. As darkness slowly falls, another transformation begins. Hundreds of paper lanterns are carefully lit. Their warm golden glow reflects softly upon wooden houses and narrow streams. Some lanterns line the stone roads. Others hang beneath the eaves of homes. A few float gently upon the water, drifting quietly downstream beneath the evening stars. The village appears almost dreamlike. The lanterns remind everyone that even a small light can guide others through darkness. One of the most meaningful ceremonies during the year is the prayer for a successful harvest. Standing together before the shrine, farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and samurai bow their heads as offerings of freshly harvested rice, vegetable, and sake are respectfully placed before the altar. The prayers are simple. May the rains come gently. May the rivers remain clear. May the fields be fertile. May every family remain safe. No one asks for riches, only enough to sustain the community through another year. It is a quiet reminder that every person, regardless of rank, depends upon the same earth and the same seasons. Later, after the celebrations have ended and visitors slowly return home, a different kind of peace settles over the village. Inside one modest wooden house, several friends gather around a small charcoal brazier. A kettle begins to whisper as water slowly reaches its perfect temperature. Tea leaves are carefully measured. Bowls are warmed. Every movement is calm. Every gesture deliberate. The tea ceremony is not simply about drinking tea. It is an opportunity to slow the mind, to appreciate silence, to honor one's guests through complete attention. Within these quiet moments, there is no concern for status or ambition. There is only gratitude for shared company. Not far away, inside the temple, a lone monk sits motionless in meditation. His breathing is slow. Outside, the sound of the wind moving through bamboo becomes almost indistinguishable from silence itself. Many samurai also practiced meditation, believing that a peaceful mind wiser decisions than an anxious one. In stillness, they learned patience. In silence, they discovered clarity. Long before facing challenges beyond the village, they first learned to master the thoughts within themselves. As the moon rises above the surrounding mountains, silver light gently bathes the rooftops below. The lanterns burn lower. The temple bell sounds one final time. Families close their shoji doors. Children fall asleep after a day filled with laughter and celebration. The village grows quiet once more. Looking across this peaceful landscape, it becomes clear that the spirit of the samurai was never shaped by battle alone. It was nurtured in sacred shrines beneath ancient trees, in temples filled with quiet reflection, in joyful festivals welcoming the arrival of spring, in graceful dances that preserved the wisdom of ancestors, in lanterns that illuminated dark evenings, in bowls of carefully prepared tea shared between friends, and in moments of meditation, where the loudest voice was often silence itself. For the people of the samurai village, faith was not something reserved for special occasions. It flowed gently through every season, every celebration, and every ordinary day, quietly reminding them that true strength was found not only in courage, but also in gratitude, humility, and peace. As the first rays of sunlight climb above the distant mountains, the peaceful samurai village begins another ordinary day. From outside, everything appears calm. Smoke rises gently from kitchen chimneys. Children carry wooden buckets to the village well. Farmers prepare to walk toward the rice fields. Birdsong fills the cool morning air. Yet beyond a line of towering cedar trees, hidden from the main road, another part of village life is already underway. A long wooden building stands quietly beneath the forest canopy. Its wide doors are open. The polished wooden floor reflects the soft golden light of dawn. Inside there are no decorations, no luxurious furniture, only simple weapon racks, neatly arranged practice equipment, and an atmosphere of complete concentration. This is the dojo, the training hall. For generations, this is where samurai prepared themselves for the possibility of war, not because they wished for battle, but because they understood that peace could only be protected by those willing to prepare for difficult times. As young students quietly enter the hall, they remove their sandals and bow deeply before stepping onto the polished floor. Then they bow once again toward their instructor. These gestures are not empty traditions. They are reminders that humility must come before skill. Respect must come before strength. Only after these quiet rituals does the day's training begin. The first sound to echo through the hall is not shouting. It is the gentle rhythm of wooden swords meeting one another. The students practice kenjutsu, the classical art of swordsmanship. Each carries a wooden practice sword known as a bokken. Real blades remain safely stored away. Today's lesson is not about defeating an enemy. It is about perfecting movement. The instructor walks silently among the students. A slight adjustment to a foot, a small correction to the angle of a wrist. A reminder to breathe more slowly. Again and again the same movements are repeated. A single cut, a careful step, a controlled turn, hour after hour. Some might wonder why they repeat the same techniques hundreds of times. The answer is simple. When fear arrives, the body does not rise to the level of hope. It falls back upon the level of training. The goal is to make every movement so natural that it becomes part of the warrior himself. Yet even here, the greatest lesson is not how to strike. It is learning when not to. A skilled swordsman understands that drawing the blade should always be the final choice, never the first. When the sword practice concludes, the students gather outside beneath the open sky. Rows of straw targets stand at the far end of a grassy field. Long bamboo bows rest neatly upon wooden racks. Now begins the practice of Kyudo, the way of the bow. Unlike hurried archery competitions, Kyudo emphasizes calmness above speed. Each student stands quietly before the target. The bow is raised with slow precision. The breathing becomes steady, the body relaxes. For a brief moment, everything becomes perfectly still. The arrow is released. It glides silently through the cool morning air before striking the target with a soft, satisfying sound. The instructor smiles, not because every arrow has found the center, but because every student has learned to remain calm. In Kyudo, the greatest opponent is often one's own wandering mind. As the morning continues, another form of training begins. The weapons are placed aside. Students now practice jujutsu. Pairs face one another upon woven mats. Instead of relying upon strength, they learn balance. Leverage, timing, how to redirect an opponent's force rather than meeting it head-on. The movements appear almost like a dance. One student steps forward, the other pivots gently. A wrist is guided, a shoulder turns. Within seconds, the attacker finds himself safely pinned to the ground without unnecessary violence. The lesson is clear. Victory belongs not only to the strongest. It often belongs to the one who remains calm enough to think clearly. Outside the dojo, another group prepares for mounted training. Several horses wait patiently beneath the shade of ancient pine trees. The samurai approach each animal with quiet respect. They brush its coat, check its saddle, offer fresh water before climbing into the saddle. Horse and rider must trust one another completely. Only then can they move as one. Soon the training field fills with the rhythmic sound of galloping hooves. The riders practice guiding their horses with remarkable precision. They weave between wooden posts, turn sharply at full speed. Some raise their bows while riding, releasing arrows without breaking their rhythm. Watching them, it becomes difficult to tell where the horse ends and the rider begins. Together, they move with effortless harmony. Yet mastering individual skills alone is never enough. A single warrior cannot win every battle, so the afternoon is devoted to something equally important: strategy. Inside a large wooden hall, the instructor spreads a hand-drawn map across the floor. Small wooden markers represent hills, villages, and armies. The students gather around carefully. They discuss where supplies should travel, how rivers might protect one flank, why narrow mountain passes could become dangerous traps, when to advance, when to retreat. They learn that wisdom often saves more lives than bravery alone. An unnecessary battle is considered a failure of leadership. The finest commanders seek victory with the smallest possible cost. As the lesson ends, the students walk into an open field where tall poles have already been planted. Colorful banners flutter gently in the afternoon breeze. These are the battle standards, or sashimono. On real battlefields, smoke, dust, and noise often made spoken commands impossible to hear. Instead, warriors learn to recognize the distinctive flags of their own lord. Each color, each family crest, each banner carried meaning. One signal ordered in advance, another called for retreat, others directed troops toward different positions. To an experienced samurai, these banners spoke as clearly as words. Not far away stands a large, ceremonial drum. Its polished wooden body gleams beneath the late afternoon sun. A senior warrior lifts two heavy drumsticks. The first strike echoes across the valley like distant thunder. Then another, and another. The deep rhythm rolls through the surrounding hills. On the battlefield, war drums served many purposes. They marked the beginning of an advance. They coordinated movement between distant units. They strengthened courage among weary soldiers. Even horses learned to recognize their familiar rhythms. Here in the village, however, the drums are heard only during training. Their powerful echoes remind everyone that preparation exists so that, if conflict should ever come, confusion might be replaced by discipline. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western mountains, training finally comes to an end. The students bow once more to their instructors. Weapons are carefully cleaned before being returned to their proper places. The horses are brushed and fed. The banners are folded. The great drum falls silent. Soon the warriors leave the dojo and return to the same full village roads where children laugh, merchants close their shops, and families prepare the evening meal. Watching them disappear into the quiet streets, one realization becomes impossible to ignore. The true purpose of all this training was never to glorify war. It was to ensure that, should darkness ever threaten the village, those entrusted with its protection would meet that moment with discipline instead of panic, wisdom instead of anger, and courage tempered by compassion. For the samurai, the greatest victory was not always won on the battlefield. Sometimes, it was won on peaceful mornings inside a humble wooden dojo, where every bow, every breath, every practiced step, and every lesson quietly prepared them to preserve the peace they valued above all else. When people think of the samurai, the first images that often appear are battles, armor, and swords beneath the smoke of war. But history has a surprising chapter that is often overlooked. What happened when the battles ended? What happened when Japan entered a long era of peace? The answer would transform the samurai forever. After the victory of Tokugawa Ieyasu at the beginning of the 17th century, Japan entered the Edo period, a time that would last for more than 200 years. Unlike the chaotic centuries before it, this was an age of remarkable stability. The great wars between rival clans became distant memories. Castles remained standing, but armies rarely marched. The sound of weapons was replaced by the sounds of daily life. Farmers working in the fields, merchants opening their shops, artists creating new works, scholars studying ancient texts. For many generations, Japan experienced a level of peace that was unusual in the world at that time. But this created a unique challenge. If the samurai were originally a warrior class, what role would they have in a peaceful society? The answer was not simple. The sword remained a symbol of their identity, but many samurai gradually became something very different. They became administrators, teachers, scholars, artists, civil servants. The warrior class learned how to govern rather than fight. During the Edo period, many samurai served their lords as government officials. They managed records, supervised villages, collected information, settled disputes, and helped maintain order throughout their domains. Their days were no longer spent preparing for battles. Instead, they spent hours writing documents, studying laws, and organizing the complex systems that allowed society to function peacefully. The skills that once helped them command armies were now used to manage communities. Discipline became administration. Strategy became planning. Leadership became service. Education also became an important part of samurai life. Because peace reduced the need for constant military training, many warriors devoted themselves to learning. They studied history, philosophy, mathematics, literature, and political theory. Some became respected teachers who educated younger generations of samurai families. Others opened private schools where children learned reading, writing, and moral teachings. Knowledge became another form of strength. A true samurai was no longer judged only by his ability with a sword. He was expected to possess wisdom as well. Many samurai also became scholars. They copied ancient manuscripts, studied philosophy, collected books, discussed questions about morality, government, and human nature. They believed that improving the mind was just as important as improving the body. The image of the silent warrior sitting beside a lamp, reading classical texts late into the night, became just as meaningful as the image of a swordsman on the battlefield. Peace also allowed creativity to flourish. Some samurai turned toward the arts. They practiced calligraphy, painting, tea ceremony, and traditional music. Others became skilled poets, expressing their thoughts through carefully written verses about nature, seasons, and the passing of time. A single falling leaf, a quiet mountain path, the sound of rain on a wooden roof. These simple moments became sources of inspiration. The warrior who once trained to face death now learned to appreciate the beauty of ordinary life. This transformation revealed something important about the samurai. They were never only warriors. The sword was only one part of their identity. Beneath the armor was a culture that valued education, reflection, and self-improvement. The long peace of the Edo period changed the meaning of being a samurai. A warrior no longer proved himself only through victory in battle. He proved himself through responsibility, through knowledge, through service, through the ability to create harmony within society. Of course, this peaceful era was not perfect. Some lower-ranking samurai struggled financially because their fixed incomes could not always match the changing economy. Some felt disconnected from their original warrior traditions. Yet even during these challenges, the samurai continued to adapt. They found new ways to serve. They preserved old traditions while embracing new roles. As evening falls over an Edo village, a different image of the samurai appears. Not a warrior charging across a battlefield, but a government official carefully writing reports by candlelight. A teacher guiding young students, a scholar studying ancient wisdom, an artist creating beauty from a blank page, a poet watching the moon rise above a quiet garden. More than 200 years of peace did not erase the samurai. it revealed another side of them, the side that valued patience over aggression, wisdom over pride, creation over destruction, and perhaps this was the greatest test of all. Anyone can learn to fight during times of war, but learning how to live with purpose during times of peace requires a different kind of strength. The samurai survived not because they were only warriors, they survived because they learned how to become something more. For more than 700 years, the samurai had stood at the center of Japanese history. They had protected castles, served powerful lords, governed villages, preserved traditions, and shaped the values that influenced Japanese society for generations. But no era lasts forever. By the 19th century, the world around Japan was changing rapidly. New technologies were arriving. Foreign powers were expanding. Old systems that had existed for centuries were beginning to disappear, and the samurai faced their greatest challenge not on a battlefield, but in a changing world. In the middle of the 19th century, Japan entered a period of transformation known as the Meiji Restoration. After centuries of rule under the Tokugawa shogunate, political power returned to the emperor. The new government believed Japan needed to modernize quickly in order to compete with powerful Western nations. Railways were built, factories were established, new schools were created. A modern government system began to replace the old feudal structure. But modernization required one difficult decision. The traditional class system had to end. For centuries, society had been divided into different groups, with the samurai standing above farmers, craftsmen, and merchants. Now the new leaders believed that Japan needed equality among citizens, and a national identity that was stronger than loyalty to individual lords. Slowly, the privileges that defined the samurai began to disappear. The domains ruled by feudal lords were abolished. Samurai families lost their special status. The government replaced traditional warrior payments with new financial systems. For many samurai, this was not simply a political change. It was the disappearance of the world they had known since childhood. Perhaps the most symbolic change came with the Hattori Edict of 1876. This law prohibited most people from wearing swords in public. For centuries, the two swords of the samurai had represented identity, honor, and social position. A warrior without his swords felt like a person separated from his own history. To outsiders, it was only a weapon. To the samurai, it was a symbol of who they were. Now, those blades were forced to remain at home. The sound of swords on village roads slowly disappeared. A tradition that had lasted for hundreds of years was becoming a memory. At the same time, Japan was creating something entirely new, a modern national army. Instead of relying on the samurai warrior class, the government introduced military service for ordinary citizens. Farmers, workers, and people from different backgrounds could now become soldiers. The battlefield was no longer reserved for a special group born into a warrior family. Modern rifles, Western military techniques, and new organization replaced many traditional methods of combat. For some samurai, this represented progress. They accepted new roles as officers, teachers, government workers, and military instructors, but others felt abandoned. They believed the government had taken away the honor and purpose that had defined their lives. The frustration eventually reached its breaking point. In 1877, one final rebellion erupted. It began in the region of Satsuma, led by one of the most respected former samurai leaders, Saigo Takamori. Thousands of samurai warriors gathered to challenge the new government. They carried traditional swords and fought with the courage of an older age. But they faced a modern army equipped with new weapons and better resources. The conflict became known as the Satsuma Rebellion. For months, former warriors fought against the very government that had once represented their traditions. They displayed extraordinary bravery. They fought according to the values they had inherited for generations. But courage alone could not overcome modernization. The imperial army eventually defeated the rebellion. With the death of Saigo Takamori and the defeat of the Satsuma forces, the age of the samurai warriors came to a final end. Yet the end of the samurai was not the disappearance of their influence. Many former samurai adapted to the new world. Some became politicians, some became educators. Some joined the modern military. Others continued preserving traditional arts, philosophy, and cultural practices. The warrior class disappeared, but the values associated with them continued to live. Discipline, responsibility, honor, self-control, respect. These ideas survive beyond the battlefield. Walking through an old samurai village today, it is difficult to imagine the dramatic changes that once shook these quiet streets. The homes remain, the gardens remain. The temples and roads still carry echoes of the past. But the warriors who once walked here with swords at their sides are gone. Their era ended not because they were defeated by another clan. It ended because the world itself changed. The samurai belonged to a time of castles, lords, and carefully preserved traditions. Modern Japan belonged to a time of factories, technology, and national transformation. The transition was painful. It was filled with uncertainty, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter. The final lesson of the samurai may be the most unexpected one. True strength is not only the ability to fight for what one believes in. It is also the ability to adapt when the world changes. The swords were taken away. The old system disappeared. The villages became quieter. But the spirit that shaped the samurai continued to influence Japan long after last warrior laid down his blade. An era had ended, but a legacy had just begun. Centuries have passed since the last samurai walked through the streets of Japan. The castles that once represented powerful lords have fallen into silence. The battles that shaped generations have become stories written in history books. Yet, if you know where to look, the world of the samurai has not completely disappeared. Across Japan there are still towns and districts where the old atmosphere remains. Ancient wooden houses still stand. Stone paths still wind between traditional neighborhoods. Narrow streets still follow the same patterns created hundreds of years ago. Walking through these places today was almost like stepping through a doorway into the past. The voices of the warriors may be gone, but their footsteps remain. One of the most remarkable places where this history survives is Kakunodate. Located in Akita Prefecture, Kakunodate is often called the Little Kyoto of Tohoku because of its beautifully preserved samurai district. During the Edo period, this town was home to many samurai families who served the local lord. Unlike many historic areas that have been transformed by modern development, Kakunodate has carefully protected its traditional streets. Large wooden gates still stand at the entrances of former samurai residences. Behind these gates are spacious gardens filled with ancient trees, stone pathways, and traditional houses that have survived for generations. Walking through the quiet streets, visitors can imagine the daily rhythm of samurai life. A warrior leaving his home at sunrise. A family gathering inside a wooden residence. Children learning discipline and tradition beneath the watchful eyes of their elders. The atmosphere is peaceful, but every corner carries memories of another age. Further along the old Nakasendo route lies another glimpse of feudal Japan. The villages of Tsumago-juku and Magome-juku. Long ago, These towns served as important post stations along the mountain road connecting Kyoto and Edo, the former capital of Japan. Travelers, officials, and samurai passed through these villages while moving between regions. Today, the streets of Tsumago and Magome remain remarkably preserved. Modern signs and power lines are carefully hidden. Traditional wooden buildings line the roads. Old inns, once used by travelers resting during long journeys, still welcome visitors who wish to experience the feeling of the past. Walking along the stone paths surrounded by forests and mountains, it becomes easy to imagine a different time. A messenger carrying important documents. A samurai traveling beneath a straw hat. A merchant transporting goods between distant provinces. The road itself becomes a connection between the present and the Edo period. Another important place connected to samurai history is Haji, a historic castle town in Yamaguchi Prefecture. Haji was once the center of the powerful Choshu domain and played an important role during the final years of the samurai era. Even today, parts of the old town preserve the atmosphere of a traditional samurai settlement. White walls surround former residences. Stone streets lead through quiet neighborhoods. Ancient houses reveal the lifestyle of warriors who once lived there. Unlike the dramatic battlefields often associated with samurai history, Haji tells a different story. It shows the peaceful side of samurai life. The homes where families were raised, the gardens where people reflected quietly. The streets where officials walked while carrying out their daily responsibilities. Haji reminds visitors that samurai were not only soldiers, they were also administrators, scholars, and members of a living community. In the heart of modern Kanazawa, another remarkable area continues to preserve the memory of the warrior class, the Nagamochi Samurai District. Surrounded by modern buildings, this historic neighborhood creates a striking contrast between past and present. During the Edo period, Nagamochi was where many samurai families lived near Kanazawa Castle. Today visitors can walk along narrow streets bordered by traditional earthen walls. The famous mud walls and wooden gates still create a strong sense of history. Inside preserved residences, guests can discover tatami rooms, peaceful gardens, old household objects, and spaces where samurai families once lived their everyday lives. Here, history does not feel distant. It feels personal. You can see where people slept, where they studied, where they welcomed guests, where they prepared for another day of duty. What makes these places extraordinary is not only their age, it is the feeling they preserve. Many historical sites around the world survive only as ruins, but these samurai neighborhoods continue to breathe. They still have streets where people walk, homes where families live, gardens where flowers continue to bloom, shops where local traditions are passed from one generation to the next. They are not frozen museums. They are living connections to history. Standing on an old stone road beneath the shadow of traditional wooden houses, it becomes easier to understand the world of the samurai, a world where honor shaped daily behavior, where family traditions were carefully protected, where discipline influenced even the smallest actions. The samurai era ended more than a century ago, but these villages and districts continue to whisper its story. They remind us that history is not only found in books or ancient artifacts. Sometimes, history survives beneath our feet. In a wooden doorway, in a garden path, in the quiet curve of an old street. And for those who walk slowly enough to listen, these places still carry the spirit of the samurai, a spirit built not only through war, but through family, culture, responsibility, and the simple moments of everyday life. The warriors are gone, the swords have become silent. But their villages remain. waiting for anyone willing to step through the gates and travel back into the forgotten world of Japan's samurai. The story of the samurai is often told through images of warriors holding swords. We remember their armor, their battles, their castles, their victories and defeats. But if we only see them as fighters, we miss the deeper meaning of their existence. The samurai were not remembered only because they knew how to fight. They were remembered because they followed a way of life. A way built upon discipline, responsibility, respect, and the endless pursuit of self-improvement. Although the samurai class disappeared more than a century ago, many of the values they practiced continue to influence Japanese culture today. The first and perhaps most important lesson they left behind is discipline. For the samurai, discipline was not limited to the battlefield. It existed in every part of life. The way they practiced swordsmanship, the way they prepared tea, the way they wrote calligraphy, the way they organized their homes. They believed that greatness was not created through one extraordinary moment, but through thousands of small actions repeated with patience and dedication. This idea remains deeply respected in modern Japan. Whether in education, craftsmanship, sports or professional life, the importance of steady effort and continuous improvement continues to reflect this ancient mindset. The samurai also left behind the value of loyalty. In their world, loyalty meant more than simply following orders. It represented trust, commitment, and the willingness to stand beside others during difficult times. A samurai understood that no person existed alone. Families depended on one another. Villages survived through cooperation. Leaders could only succeed when those around them worked together. Today, this sense of responsibility toward one's group can still be seen in many aspects of Japanese society. The idea that individual actions affect the larger community remains an important cultural value. Another powerful lesson was responsibility. A samurai was expected to accept the consequences of his decisions. Honor was not about appearing perfect. It was about having the courage to take responsibility when mistakes were made. This principle shaped the way warriors viewed their duties. A position of authority was not simply a privilege. It was a responsibility to protect, serve, and act with fairness. The samurai also demonstrated the importance of humility. Despite their social status, the ideal samurai was not supposed to be arrogant. True strength did not require constant display. A skilled warrior did not need to prove himself through unnecessary conflict. Instead, wisdom came from understanding one's own limitations. The quiet master was often considered greater than the person who constantly sought recognition. This appreciation for humility can still be found in Japanese traditions, where respect and modesty are often valued over personal pride. The pursuit of learning was another lasting legacy. Many people imagine samurai only training with weapons, but the greatest warriors were often scholars as well. They studied philosophy, poetry, history, art, politics. They believed that improving the mind was just as important as strengthening the body. A person who mastered only physical skills remained incomplete. A truly accomplished individual continued learning throughout life. This belief helped create a culture that values education, craftsmanship, and dedication to one's chosen path. The samurai also taught the importance of respect for others. Respect was shown through simple actions, a polite greeting, a careful conversation, a moment of patience, a willingness to listen. The samurai understood that every person played a role in society. Farmers produced food. Craftsmen created essential tools. Merchants connected communities. Each contribution mattered. Respect created harmony between different parts of society. Perhaps the most difficult lesson of all was self-control. The samurai believed that the greatest enemy was often not outside the battlefield. It was within the human heart. Fear, pride, desire, all could lead a person away from wisdom. Through meditation, training, and reflection, samurai learned to control their emotions rather than become controlled by them. A calm mind was considered one of the strongest weapons a person possessed. Today, this idea remains powerful. In a world filled with constant noise and distraction, the ability to remain patient and focused is still a valuable skill. Looking back at the villages where samurai once lived, it becomes clear that their greatest legacy was never their swords. Steel eventually rusts. Armor eventually disappears. Castles eventually fall. But ideas can survive for centuries. The lessons of the samurai continue to live through everyday actions. The student who studies with dedication. The craftsman who perfects a skill over many years. The worker who takes pride in responsibility. The person who chooses kindness over anger. The individual who continues learning despite challenges. These are the places where the spirit of the samurai quietly remains. The samurai era was filled with contradictions. They were warriors who valued peace. They carried weapons but practiced restraint. They lived by strict traditions but adapted when the world changed. Perhaps that is why their story continues to fascinate people around the world. The samurai were not perfect. They belonged to a different time with different beliefs. But beyond the battles and legends, they left behind lessons about human character. Lessons about becoming stronger not only through power, but through patience. Not only through victory, but through responsibility. Not only through defeating others, but through mastering oneself. The swords of the samurai have long been silent, yet the values they represented continue to echo across generations. Because the greatest legacy of any civilization is not the weapons it creates. It is the wisdom it leaves behind. As the sun slowly begins to disappear behind the distant mountains, we return once again to the quiet village where our journey began. The golden light of evening falls gently across the wooden houses. The ancient stone paths that once carried the footsteps of samurai slowly disappear beneath the shadows of twilight. A soft breeze moves through the bamboo forests surrounding the village. The leaves whisper quietly, as if carrying forgotten stories from hundreds of years ago. Far away, the sound of a temple bell echoes through the valley. One deep note, then another. The sound travels across the rooftops, over the gardens, and beyond the fields where generations of families once worked beneath the changing seasons. For a moment, it feels as though time has stopped. The warriors who once walked these roads are gone. The castles that protected their lords have become silent memories. The swords that represented their status now rest behind glass, preserved as reminders of another age. Yet something remains. Something that cannot be placed inside a museum. Something that cannot be measured by ancient buildings or historical artifacts. It is the spirit that shaped the lives of the samurai, the spirit of Bushidō. Although the samurai class disappeared more than a century ago, the values they followed continue to influence Japan to today. Honor, loyalty, respect, responsibility, self-control. These ideas can still be found in the careful preservation of old villages, in traditional ceremonies, in craftsmanship passed down through generations, and in the quiet appreciation of simplicity and harmony. Every wooden doorway, every stone pathway, every peaceful garden, every ancient temple bell, carries a small piece of that forgotten world. The villages where samurai once lived are not merely historical landmarks. They are living memories. They remind us of a time when people believed that true strength came not only from power, but from character. A time when honor was protected, promises were valued, and duty was considered greater than personal desire. As night finally covers the village, the lanterns begin to glow softly behind paper windows. The wind continues to move through the bamboo. The temple bell fades into silence. But the story remains. Because the samurai may have disappeared, yet the lessons they left behind continue to walk with us. Through every generation, through every culture, and through every quiet village road where history still waits to be remembered.